Wamaru. There we go. Oh, it's in a target. Yeah, cool. Okay, so we're definitely live. We're recording. Sensational. This is my second last podcast for the year, and I think it's episode 90. Oh no, 89. Episode 89. So we're nearly into the nine zeros. Cool, man. Okay, feeling good? All ready to go?
Yeah, ready.
Sensational. Well, welcome back to the Coaches to the Moon podcast, ladies and gentlemen, episode 89. We're getting closer to 100. I'm very honored today to be joined by Caelan Huntress. He's the creative director of the digital marketing agency Stellar Platforms. He's also a keynote speaker, a trainer, an author, a world traveling nomad. He's here to talk today about how businesses and solopreneurs can really build their own personal brand and create that platform on the next level. So originally from Portland, Oregon, and now joining us from Oamaru in New Zealand. Caelan, thanks so much for being here, mate.
Hey, thanks for having me, Alex. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Me too, especially this first part. You started your career as an acrobat in the circus. What was that like?
Uh, it was fun, obviously. I spent a lot of time as a street performer, earning and maintaining the attention of an audience, and I found that those skills transitioned really naturally over into marketing, because marketing is all about earning and maintaining the attention of a demographic. And so instead of trying to gain attention from the people right in front of me, marketing allowed me to gain attention from a type of person. And it got me into thinking about what does this type of person really need? What would be valuable for them? And the live event experience of being a performer, I still really like. I do a lot of Zoom meetings. I play a lot of games online. And so I still like the audience aspect of it, but the demographic aspect of marketing, it still uses a lot of those same tools of earning and maintaining attention.
So funny because my next follow-up question for that was it's always when someone's had a big transition from one career to another. Like I started off as a chef. I was a chef for about 10 years, but I also did bartending, front of house, barista, that sort of thing. And I always get asked, did you learn anything as a chef that you now take into your business? And so I was going to ask the same question, but you've already nailed it and taken away half my interview. But that's great. That's great. So basically, so the circus, that's a. It feels like to become an acrobat in a circus. That's obviously a skill you've got to love and work very hard on. I'd imagine for many hours a day, or was that quite natural for you? Because you look like you're in good shape. You look like quite tall and slim. Are you naturally good at that, or did that take a lot of work to get to that point?
It took some work. Enjoying it is really good, but it's not a prerequisite. If you're willing to do the reps, you can learn just about anything. I liked juggling so much that I thought, well, if I just spend some time learning how to do this, then I can
Yeah.
eventually get to do some really amazing tricks. And those tricks stack on top of each other. Any trick you do is a combination of smaller tricks. And this is the same in marketing as well. Any newsletter you send is a combination of a lot of the tiny pieces that go into it. And I'm sure this is one of the ways that your chef experience really helped inform your marketing, is that you got to get the right recipe. You got to bring all the ingredients together, and then you got to do it in a certain way to create an outcome. Am I right?
Yeah, well, one of the most famous chefs ever, Marco Pierre White, he says cooking is just lots of little things done well. It's not
Uh-huh.
about creating the big end product. It's about how well you chop your onions, how well you balance your sauce, all the things, and then it's an assembly at the end of it. So you're 100% right. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
That's really cool, man. So you've touched on newsletters there when you're talking about marketing. So we talk about this a bit on the podcast that email, you'll always get these Facebook ads and these TikTok ads of loud young men yelling at you that funnels are dead, email is dead, all this kind of thing. However, you've been in the industry for a long time. You're doing quite well in the industry and you've gone straight to email when you're talking about marketing. So what are your thoughts on email going into 2023? Is it still as relevant as ever? Is it better? Is it worse? What do you think?
So far, it's still relevant so far. I don't know if that's always going to be the case, because right now I don't identify as a digital marketer anymore. I as a Web 2 marketer learning Web 3 because all of our tools are changing. And the things that worked last decade, they might not be what works in the next decade. As Web 3, which if your listeners don't know what Web is, it's this next evolution in the internet, where instead of these siloed walled gardens being the places where we go to interact with each other, you know, if you're going to do anything in Facebook, you do it within Facebook's ecosystem. And that's Web 2. Web 1 was where we could just consume content. Web 2 is where we can post content and see it in these gardens. And Web 3 is going to be centralized, where your content isn't owned vertical. You know, there's not a company like Facebook or Twitter that's the interface between you and the rest of the world. And right now, email is in that Web 2 world. You can create content, but you have to go through an email service provider like ConvertKit or ActiveCampaign, and you have to use this company to send your message out via email to a lot of people. And there's a lot of great things about email. It's a permissioned list, so the people who are on your list have gained trust enough to subscribe to it. And so that's a lot different than just yelling out into the void and hoping people hear you. There's still a lot of advantages to email, but will it really be important in the age of Web 3? I don't know. We might be signing into things with our wallets and publishing on a decentralized blockchain that other people can opt into through places that we can't even anticipate. So at the moment, I'm still using email, but I'm actively looking at what the other tools are going to be, because I think in 5 years, email may go away. At the moment, though, I don't think it's happened yet. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's I think email at the moment is a great place for people to go to not be relying so much on big social media platforms, which, as we've seen lately, are pretty volatile, right? So, for example, we take the Twitter example. Pre Elon Musk taking over Twitter and post. Pre, you could be politically on the wrong side of Twitter, for example, allegedly, and then post something and then your platform's gone. So if that's your only way of talking to your audience, then you're screwed because someone doesn't agree with you because it's a private company. Now, a lot of people disagree with the owner of the platform, and so now people are wanting to pull their content away from it. Once again, even though that's voluntary, it's proving that the social media platform is pretty volatile and pretty political, I suppose. And so your business could be taken away in the click of a button like that. So that's where I think email is a great place to go, especially for coaches, solopreneurs who want to get a message out to an audience. Whether or not it's going to be relevant soon, not sure at the moment. Yeah, I'm doing my best to master every platform we're on. And knowing that I'm not as a lot of us marketers, we're not really that good at the IT tech side. We're just kind of using our skills, and then other people develop it for us. That's me, definitely is the case. However, I have a couple of friends, they have a marketing agency called Comet, and they're awesome. And on their website, they mention blockchain. And I was like, how does that work? How does blockchain become part of marketing? And he sat me down and explained it over lunch, and I could probably give you a very rough example, but it's basically what you just said. Decentralized content that becomes part of your everyday life. And blockchain's not just about having NFTs and cryptocurrency. It's about, everyone having sole ownership of their own online ecosystem, I suppose. It's very, very interesting.
And I think the place where this matters the most to your audience, Alex, is right now an email list is so powerful because you list. You've got the email addresses of the people who opted in. But with blockchain entering the game, imagine a membership relationship. When somebody joins your community, they might get an NFT that allows them to access members-only content. You might publish in a specific Discord channel that only the people who own this NFT, because they attended an event or they joined a program or they're an alumni of your coaching program or something like that. You can award these NFTs to create member-gated content. And I think that's going to be where Web3 marketing is really going to get traction, is when that member-gated content becomes accessible so that creators can say, okay, I'm going to I'm going to deliver this kind of content for this section of my audience, instead of doing a segment in an email service provider and saying, okay, if you have this tag, then you get these messages. Instead, it's not going to be centralized where you say that this is what the different membership levels are. It's going to be decentralized because the members themselves will carry their qualifications for being on the different levels of membership that you offer.
Like a backstage pass. I love that. That's very, very cool. What a concept. Yeah, Discord's a funny one. I tried to, I tried to get into Discord myself a few months back because I noticed that when NFT art was booming like 8 months ago, every NFT company had a Discord channel, and you go in there to see what the floor price was and everything. And it all went, it went a little bit over my head, but the way you're saying it, and you seem to have a good grasp on it, I think dipping our toes into the future whilst not getting distracted from what's working now is probably pretty important especially for entrepreneurial people who have that real shiny object syndrome, always looking for the next big thing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was easy for people to, like when you're a creator or you're a coach, you're running your own business, you get into this gig because you want to be able to pursue those interests as they come up. Shiny objects in Web3 so far. And the NFT image generation, I saw that coming along. I was like, that's not it. And sure enough, it was a fad and it came and went. And unfortunately, it's given a lot of people a really bad opinion about Web3 and about cryptocurrency and blockchain, because the image itself isn't the game. That was kind of a distraction. Gary Vaynerchuk said, think about the cabbage. They came out at a time when there was a dozen other toys that were similar and not that different. And Cabbage Patch Kids, you remember, because that's the one that took. But there was, for every Cabbage Patch Kid out there, there's 98 that don't take off. And that's what we saw this fad in NFTs, is a whole bunch of junky iterations. But now we've gotten through that and we're beginning to isolate what are those use cases that can actually help somebody who's looking to grow their business and community.
Absolutely. I love what they're doing with, once again, learning from Gary V, what they say you can do with musicians, that sort of thing, is like, you can say you've got a big SoundCloud following as a new rapper, and you don't want to go through the process of all the red tape to get produced and funded. You can go to your audience, they can all purchase an NFT, that funds your project, and then when you make money, they get royalties because they funded your project in the first place. So crowdfunding these really centralized things like TV shows and music, that's really exciting for me. Because what I love about the podcast thing, while we don't get millions of listeners, is I once filmed a pilot series for a TV cooking show. And I was always being told what to say, where to stand, what sort of recipes to make, that sort of thing. And even at that level, when there was no money behind it, there was so much red tape, so many decision makers. Whereas when we get to, just creating your own content on social media like this, you can do whatever you like. So I think for things like content creation, that's where Web3 will come in first, and allowing your audience to have super exclusive access to things that most don't, and that is very, very intriguing and alluring for an audience member. So let's talk about speaking for a minute, man, because you're an expert of kind of virtual keynote speaking. We talked about your green screen. You're in Reykjavik Library right now on your green screen, and were you into the virtual speaking side of things before virtual was the only way we could speak, or did that come about as the pandemic did?
Alex, when the pandemic started, right before it started in 2019, I had pivoted my career to work the Australian corporate speaking circuit. And that was my plan. I was going to go and speak on stages in Australia. I live in New Zealand, so it's just across the ditch. And so I started realigning my career to that. And then I fell deathly ill. have an autoimmune disorder, and I almost died in 2019. My wife nursed me back to health, and I got better. And in January, when I started my business again, because I had to close everything down, tell my client, sorry, I can't work. I don't know if I'm going to survive this. Thankfully, I did, and I survived. And in January 2020, I said, okay, I've got to realign my business so I can work from home without traveling. And then the pandemic hit. And so I already had momentum. What I found at the beginning of the pandemic, Alex, was that I was within spitting distance of the cutting edge for virtual events because I've got this performance background that makes me a dynamite speaker on stage. And I've been a technical nerd for as long as I've been running my marketing agency, which was about 12 years. And so I started getting all of these requests from people who wanted to host virtual events. And so I took every certification I could, and I eventually became one of the foremost experts in leading virtual online. I actually teach a certification course to other public speakers on how to give better virtual presentations. But what was really interesting is I had all these people coming to me and they said, hey, live workshops that we've delivered in person. And we need to now convert these into interactive webinars. How do we do that? And so over the last couple of years, Alex, I've been spending a lot of time on gamification, helping people not just translate a live workshop into a virtual workshop, but also to make it more interactive with games that are developed from the educational material. And so that's been a lot of my work since the pandemic started. It's been a lot of fun.
It sounds fun. It sounds fun. So let's dig into that a little bit, because the gamification is another sort of Web3 sort of word we hear a bit. While it's not Web3, it's like everyone who seems to be on the cutting edge of apps and businesses is like, gamify it. How do you gamify your restaurant menu? How do you gamify your program? So we have all attended far too many Zoom meetings and Zoom presentations over the past 2 years. And I myself have paid for virtual events that I've found myself sitting on a computer game or just doing additional work whilst on mute in this event, whilst attending. For the coaches out there who I know are still running virtual events because they found that it is hugely cheaper and less risky than renting out a space. Could you give us a couple of tangible examples of how to make it more interactive for the audience?
Sure. One of the things that I like to do, Alex, with an unofficial start. And an unofficial start goes from about 5 minutes before the meeting to 3 minutes after it's scheduled to start. And this is an activity that rewards people who arrive early, but it also buffers the beginning so that you don't start at the top of the hour while someone else discovers, wait a minute, I have to update, I have to reboot my computer. Those technical glitches are virtual meetings, and we can't like bar the doors and say, well, you're late, you can't come in. We have to accommodate people who are entering a couple minutes late. And so I find that having an unofficial start, a whiteboard and writing a riddle, someone to comment in the chat box if they can figure out, it gives an activity that gets everything going but still providing that buffer so that you can formally start the meeting at 3 minutes after the top of the hour.
That's great. That's awesome. That's fantastic. And so I think with the meetings that are sort of keynotes, 45 to 90 minutes, that sort of thing, I think you can capture attention for long enough. What about when people run sort of a full day virtual event and it's 8 in the morning till 11, 1 hour lunch break, come back? How do we, besides being a captivating speaker, how can we keep energy high, interaction high when it's 2 p.m., people have been sitting in their office on the weekend for 6 hours, it's sunny outside, and all they can think about is what they're going to do after this? What does a coach or speaker do to get past that 2 p.m. slump?
Well, the two pieces of advice I'd give, Alex, are first, to change activities every 10 minutes. If you're sharing slides and you're talking at people, you've got about 10 minutes losing attention, max. And that's even if your content is top. And so I look at the outline for my day and I put my slides in 10-minute blocks. And then I intersperse activities, breakout rooms, games among those blocks so that way they're not getting 40 minutes of just listening with no interaction. That's the first. The second point that I'd make is to invite contribution. Because if you get people to contribute, they're going to be much more likely to pay attention to you. And oh, look at this. I think I've got this ready. There are 4 levels of digital engagement through these with you. I mean, observing is the bare minimum. We just get somebody to stare at us. But what we want to do is we want to get them to participate by asking them to type in the chat box, to answer a question. And the more that we can get them to participate, the more that they'll go up this ladder instead of down. There's a natural gravitational pull so that over time, people will begin to resist, whether that's 10 minutes into your presentation or 4 hours into your presentation. They're going to resist unless you invite contribution, because that's what's going to move people up this ladder. And so I'm always asking, so what do you think about that? Type it in the chat box and let me know what you think about that. Hey, can you take yourself off of mute and tell? Because if I'm inviting that contribution, they're not going to be able to go read their email notifications or their Facebook feed, because I'm demanding their attention by involving them in the content. I think that's the key.
Totally. Especially whether it's in a sales situation, educational, or even in these group coaching programs where you catch up once a week. You know, I have a couple of group coaching programs that I run, and trying to, when you're hot seating one person and trying to, you know, help that one person because they've asked a question, making the content relevant for the other people and saying, does this help, guys? Does anyone else have any comments on this one? I've learned that from my coaches who I sit in group meetings with, and they'll always check in. Is this helpful, guys? Like Travis Bell is one of them. He's amazing. He's a keynote speaker who speaks all over the world. He's from Australia, and he's so good at keeping us all engaged, even when he's doing a deep dive on someone's issue for 15 minutes. He makes it work for all of us. So that's really, really cool. Great tangible advice. Now, a bit of a bigger question. With the virtual speaking, virtual event and retreat scene becoming more normal and accepted now, do you see that as actually an opportunity for coaches and aspiring speakers to grow their brand, or do you believe that live in-person keynotes are still the best way to build that platform?
Well, we're in a funny time right now, Alex, because and you may have seen similar things. Webinar attendance is way down over the last 6 months. We're recording this at the end of 2022, and I'm finding it really hard to get people to show up to scheduled events. And I think it's because the valuable currency right now is time. Getting somebody to commit to putting something on their calendar is actually a much bigger ask than asking them for $15 to watch the video. So I'm finding webinars don't have the same traction that they did just a couple of years ago. I've been doing a long time. I was producing multiple webinar funnels back in 2015 when they were kind of a new thing. We didn't have a lot of technology for it, so we had to, you know, cobble together a bunch of different stuff. And webinars worked really well. And after the pandemic started, they worked great because it was one of the only ways that people could get together. Restrictions started lifting up, and people were able to congregate in person. Hunger to get back live, and people be in the room with people. And so I think that live events, they still have a really powerful effect on people who are in your geographic area, but they're limited because you can only get people who are in your geographic area. If you're going to consider a webinar, some sort of evergreen webinar funnel is usually a time-sensitive webinar, because somebody could say, oh, that's at 1 p.m. I'm booked. I'm not even going to bother register. I might register to watch the replay. But if you create an evergreen video experience, you know, like a 5-day video challenge, you register or you pay to watch the first video, the other 4 dripped out to you via email. It's asynchronous. It means that they don't have to commit to being available at the exact same time that you're giving the presentation. Synchronous time is what we're doing now, Alex, as we're talking. The people who are watching this on the live stream, they're consuming media synchronously. But if you're listening to this podcast after we're recording it, it's asynchronous. We're recording this media, and at some point in the future, you're consuming it. And that asynchronous media, I think that that's a lot more effective for coaches to build in 2023 than limiting themselves to synchronous webinars.
That's super interesting. And I have some comments on that one, on both sides.
I'd be interested to hear your take.
Yeah. The evergreen webinar, I think, sensational. I think it takes a little bit of setup. Getting before you run an evergreen webinar, you got to know that your webinar is good. You got to do it live a few times to make sure it gets the engagement. And I'm saying this because I've literally got a meeting with a client at 2 p.m. today who's thinking of doing his first evergreen webinar. And Shane, this is for you. You've got to you don't want to put out an evergreen webinar that's your first draft that you've never done live. And you know how to run good ones because you've run so many in the past. I think coaches will say evergreen webinar, that's the funnel for me, because then it's automatic sales on lock. But it's not always that way. But I've got some clients who have evergreen webinars running through a platform called EverWebinar, which is super good. And their retention and stick rate is really, really good. Their show up rate is higher than I've seen before, especially from live webinars. And the amount of time people spend watching the webinars is great. And these softwares give you that data as well, which is really, really handy. With the live synchronous webinar, lovely word, I'm going to add that to my lexicon. The live webinar, I've seen the same thing. People have really stopped attending them or caring about them, especially when it's a free masterclass, that sort of thing. What I've done with some of my clients that's been working really well is we turn it from a free masterclass into a intimate invitation only masterclass where you cap it at 15 people. And so to get a spot in that room, you have to do a phone call or a quick meeting with the facilitator to get there. That hugely increases the trust. And also then they've got someone to disappoint if they don't rock up. So it does only really work if you have a decent brand behind you already. But, if Caelan's running a masterclass and he says, I'm only doing it for 10 people, I'm going to teach you the 5 steps to increase your virtual engagement so that you're going to make more sales every webinar you do. But I can only do it with 10 people because I want to make sure that everyone in the room has their questions answered. Apply now. I'm just going to ask for a 15-minute conversation to make sure it's right for you, vice versa. And then once people have done that conversation and they get a couple of email follow-ups, there's that personal relationship, the stick rate's going way up. So less people attending, but they do show up when they say they will. So that's been a little solution we've found to work around that one lately.
Yeah, I like that a lot, Alex. It overcomes the distinction between lead generation and lead nurturing. And lead generation is getting a stranger to hand over some contact details and say, yeah, I'm going to do something with you, or I'm going to consume your content. And getting somebody to register for a webinar is lead generation. Getting them to say, yeah, I'll jump on a 15-minute call with you. That's lead generation. But once you're in that phone call and you're getting those qualification questions asked, then you're into lead nurturing. You step forward in what I call the 4-step marketing cycle. Know, like, trust, and buy. And you got to take each one of these steps, because if you skip a step, you won't make it towards the end. And I think the mistake that I see a lot of coaches do, Alex, is that they spend too much time focusing on the lead generation and not enough time focusing on the lead nurturing.
100%. As a lead generation agency for coaches, I have to do a lot of expectation managing around once we can bring conversations your way, that's not a sale in the bag. And the more experienced ones recognize that. You're so prepared, man. All these little graphics that come up, you're so prepared. That was on lock. That you pressed one button and the perfect graphic appeared in the left-hand corner there. Really, really impressive,
well,
man.
I have to admit, I set this up in advance so that anytime I want, I can just do anything up here. And I find that I often have the same things to communicate, like my book, Marketing Yourself. This is a book that I wrote earlier this year. It's how to elevate your personal platform to the next level. And I wrote this for your audience, Alex. For a long time, my target market has been authors, coaches, and speakers, people who have something to say, something to sell. And it took me 5 years to write this book because I wanted it to be good. And I've put in all the lessons that I learned in the decade of experience I've had in working with this kind of clientele, people who want to expand their impact and their influence. Because when you're a solopreneur, different ways that you interact with the world behind a business brand. You've got to use your own personality as the linchpin of your branding.
Yeah, you absolutely do. And the next topic I wanted to really jump into was your book, because while I haven't had a chance to read your entire book, the first chapter though is free for download, right? So that's really, really cool. Love that you've done that.
Yeah, that's free for anybody who subscribes to my book. They can go to or subscribes to my newsletter list. They can go to markselfbook.com/free chapter. And for subscribing to my list, I'll send you the first chapter. It's all about your personal statement and how to make a snappy personal statement that gets attention.
Yeah, no, I love that, and it's on my list for things to do in my little mini break coming up next week. Is actually sit down and read some things that I've been planning on reading. But what was an article on your LinkedIn that I found, which seemed really, really congruent with the message in your book, which was about the difference between personal branding and business branding, which seems to be a pretty big message and very, very relevant for our audience. And you use the quote, "There's no brand as powerful as your name," which I really, really love. Can you quickly just give us a breakdown of what you feel are the differences between a business brand and a personal brand?
Yeah. To break this down, I'll give you the example of 2 books that I read. And the first is The E-Myth. E-Myth was written by Michael Gerber, and he talks about that being an entrepreneur is going to, anything you want, but it's often a myth. And he uses the example of Sally, who's so good at baking, people say, you should open your own bakery. And so she opens a bakery and finds herself dealing with payroll and zoning laws more than baking. And so it turned out the entrepreneur didn't serve her. What she was doing was running a business. And her business, the bakery, was separate from business. Can be sold. It's portable. It's fungible. Any business that you own can be sold to me. And because it's just a business, it's a false incorporation of a person. It's this fictitious person we use. The business brand is portable and can travel from person to person. But a personal brand is different. And the best book I've read on how to effectively use a person in this kind of business is The Thought Leader's Practice. And this is written by 3 Australian business coaches, Matt Church and Stein. And they advocate for this different type of branding, the practice. And with the practice, you can't put a business brand in front of it because it's your name on the door. It's your expertise that people are buying. And if you think of a dentist or a lawyer, it doesn't really matter what fictitious business name is on their business cards. You're buying the person and you're buying their expertise. And so for me, Alex, that's the biggest difference between a business brand, which could be anybody, a brand, which is only you. And for coaches, there's not really other than like Action Coach, think of a generic coaching brand where somebody could say, go and get my coaching. For the most part, if somebody's hiring a coach, it's because they want this person. And if they're going to hire, having an intermediary business brand is just going to get in the way. Once Pringles did an experiment and they said, let's message on our business account and on personal accounts and see which one gets traction. And they found that the same message shared from personal reshared 27 times more often. And that's because people trust people, but we distrust businesses by nature. If you're a business and you're coming at me with a marketing idea, I've immediately got my guard up. What are you trying to sell me? But if you're a person And you're coming at me with a marketing idea. I'm like, hey, what is that about? Because I want to know why you behind this. And I think that's something that coaches need to leverage more, is their unique individuality and personality.
I 100% agree with everything you just said. I'm reading the E-Myth right now for the second time. Matt Church, who wrote the second book, lives about 20 minutes away from me, which is interesting as well. Yeah, and thirdly, the coaching space. Everyone basically, their personal page is Alex Morris, and their business page is Alex Morris, or at the very most, Alex Morris Coaching. That was me. And but you'd certainly get way more engagement on the personal profile, and that's where most of my clients, their organic marketing comes from their personal page, and they don't do much on their business page at all. The business page is for ads. The personal page is for building relationships and engagement, because no one really, like, I think I've got 9.8 thousand followers on my business page, and I get like 4 or 5 comments per post that we do at the moment. But if I put up a photo on my personal page with me and my twin daughters, it goes bonkers. It's because there's trust, right? Even if it's a marketing message, there is trust there. So it's really, really interesting that you mentioned that. So I wanted to ask you one last question before we wrap up, because I know that you've got the answers for this one. In the coaching space, like we spoke about just before we started recording, it's a very low barrier to entry, and so there's lots and lots of people becoming coaches over the last 10 years. And so it's a huge market now, but there's really only sort of 3 main niches, or niches, as I suppose you would pronounce it, is health, wealth, and relationships. And so while there are little sub-niches within that, how would, for example, a 25-year-old fitness coach start to build a personal brand that is unique when there are 11,000 other fitness coaches in the same city as him?
Well, let's go one level up, because you said there's these 3 areas. There's health, wealth, and relationships. Ostensibly, these have different outcomes for the different types of people, but I think there must just be one group. Coaches help their clients make better choices. That's what we do. And so I think if a 25-year-old fitness expert wants to get in more health for living better, I think sharing stories about choices they have made or choices their clients have made differently because of their coaching, I think that's what's going to get traction. Because then you're doing a couple of things. You're storytelling. I had this thing happen and I felt this way, and then I made this decision and this was the result. You've immediately got a story arc there. But you're also demonstrating results. If I hadn't done this coaching work myself, or if my client didn't have me as their coach, they could have made this awful choice and had this awful result. And it makes the reader think, boy, I'd hate to have that result. I really hope that I can get the result that this person got. You want the reader to be in feel like they're in the shoes of your ideal client, that they've had this transformation and now they're going to do better as long as they're working with you, and they can get that guidance in the choices. Is that helpful?
Yes, absolutely, 100%. And for the umpteenth time on this podcast, we see the importance of story in your marketing, guys, because everyone's got their own unique story. Your story is, if you've got a fitness coaching business or a business coaching or whatever, even when there's 2 action coaches doing the same job, they both have their own unique stories that their clients and their customers will relate to. So, Caelan, mate, I could talk to you all day, but other things to do. And so I'm really, really excited that we were able to get so much golden information, in my opinion, out of such a short podcast. You're an extremely smart guy. I'm really interested in the Web3 stuff you're doing, and I would really, really recommend everyone goes and grabs that first chapter, if not the whole book, of Market Yourself. We'll put the links everywhere around there. There we go. If you're watching, look at the freaking graphic he's got. This man is prepared. And that's something we can all learn. We all need to learn more from Caelan about how to do a Zoom presentation. My word. Mate, thank you so much for being on the show today. It's been a real pleasure.
Thanks, Alex. It was great talking with you. And for those of you who are listening on audio, that link is marketingyourselfbook.com/free chapter. You sign up for my newsletter and I'll send you the first chapter of my book, Marketing Yourself.
We're going to pop it in. All the content we do from this episode is going to be on the Spotify, on the Anchor, on the video clips, everywhere. So yeah, that's exactly where we'll send them, man, because that sounds like a very valuable book for a lot of the people listening. Caelan, Huntress, mate, Merry Christmas. Thank you so much for coming on, and yeah, enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, Alex. Have fun out there.
Anyone watching or listening live, I'll be back next week with another episode of Coaches to the Moon, the last one for the year. Until then, thank you so much for watching. Much love and peace out.